This video is going to be a little different. I had a lot of requests to do a Q&A, ask me anything type of video, and I normally try to answer back as many questions as I can online in comments or in messages on social media or whatever, but thankfully, I guess the channel has been really blowing up a lot lately, and it has made it a lot more difficult to keep up with all of those. So it seems like maybe the best way to do that whenever I can't reach out to everyone is to do something like this every once in a while, and plus gives us a chance to just chat about some interesting things. So today I'm going to try to answer the most asked questions. I put out something on all my different social medias as well as on the YouTube community to ask for any questions, and I got a ton of responses. So thank you all very much for everybody who sent in a question, and I'll try to get to as many of them as I can today, and then we'll do another one of these hopefully soon. So let's get started. The first question I have is from Lucius Ray. Says, any tips for getting stuck while building a live set? I feel a bit trapped in the same pattern or two for hours and hours, eventually moving on to a new song idea. The problem is I never find ways to flesh these ideas out into fully performable pieces, building intro, outro sections, patterns, bridge, transition to the next song idea, etc. So interestingly enough, like when I build out tracks for live sets, I don't build them out as whole songs. So I don't build an intro and then a bridge and then like that. What I do is I will put together different ideas that I have, and I improvise all of those things. I've been a DJ for a very, very long time and been producing music for a very long time. And so I have kind of a good gut sense for when I feel like something needs a different part or a different change or a break or a build up or a drop. So what I do with my live sets is I try to build in the ability to be able to improvise those whenever I feel like it's the moment. So it's a bit different, I think, with a live set than it is with traditional kind of producing dance music, because when you're producing, you're kind of producing something to be DJ'd generally. So you're going to produce it in a way that it needs an intro so that it can be beat matched and mixed with another track. So you're going to take out a lot of the melodic elements so that they're not clashing with other tracks, and bring in kind of a kick and an early theme, and then you'll build the track up over time, have a break, have a main body of the song, and then break things back down to an outro at the end so that it can then be overlapped with and mixed with another track. When you're performing a live set, you don't necessarily need to do it that way, because you can more smoothly blend from track to track, because you're taking out individual elements, and you can't do that when you're DJing. So I approach it very differently when I'm doing live sets. Okay, next question from Slagroom. I have a Synthstrom Deluge and several hardware synthesizers. Would getting an analog rhythm or syntax be a good addition, or just overlap? If a good addition, which would you go for first? The reality is that any of these boxes in this day and age, there's always going to be some overlap, because all of them can do drums, all of them can do synths, many of them can sample, and all of them sequence, and so there's always going to be some overlap. It kind of comes down to what kind of music you're doing and where you find that you have a need. I tend to look at all the gear that I have as what need does it fill, what purpose does it fill, or is it just fun to play? And so it's something that I want to get just because I enjoy it. But as far as a Deluge and then something like a rhythm or a syntax, I think there's definitely a lot of ways that those can work really well together. With a Deluge, it's a lot easier to sequence melodies, and you can have a lot more tracks, you can have a lot of things like that. Whereas for creating and designing drums from scratch, that's really what the rhythm and the syntax are both kind of experts in, because you're building up using drum synthesizers, you're building up unique new sounds from scratch. For example, I use my rhythm in the studio a lot. It's actually right here behind me, to actually make sounds. So I will build drum sounds from scratch, and then I will sample those drum sounds and load them into my DTACT to be able to use as performance pieces. So they definitely serve their own thing. One of the things I love about the Syntax since it came out is it kind of shortcuts that whole process, because I can actually build the sounds in the Syntax just like I could in the Rhythm, a little bit less capacity for sure, but then I can just use the Syntax as a drum machine if I want, or as a melodic piece. So it really kind of depends on what you're using it for. If you are performing, or if you're producing, or some combination of both, it would have a determining factor. The Rhythm for me is not as portable as a lot of the other boxes, definitely as the Syntax or the Deluge. So for me, it's a studio piece of equipment. So maybe building sounds, designing sounds on the Rhythm, using the analog drum engines and layering them with samples and doing all of that stuff that you can do in the Rhythm, then resampling your own unique sounds and loading those into the Deluge might be an amazing way to have some really cool, unique sounds that you can then use to perform or produce with. All right, next question. MH asks, can you give examples of how you adapt to the crowd when playing live? Do you have some recipes, or is it more intuition based? It is generally pretty intuition based. I would say that the only kind of general rules of thumb or general recipes are, and this goes back to DJing days, but it's play your slot. So if you're the first one opening up the night, if you start banging out hard techno at 150 BPM, you're not playing your slot. You're not helping build an atmosphere and an environment over the course of an entire evening. So whatever your slot is that you're set into, find out some information about who's playing before you, who's playing after you, so that you can figure out what you can design as a performer to be a bridge between those two artists. And if everybody does that over the course of the evening, you end up with a really amazingly curated night of music, because the styles and the artists will kind of flow from one to the next to the next to the next. So in general, I have things set up in my live set where I can have, lower energy, middle energy, higher energy, kind of peak time stuff, so that depending on where I am, I can bounce around between that. Then after that, it really is intuition based. I mean, and again, this comes from years of DJing, trying to get a feel for what the crowd needs at any given moment. If you've been doing, if you've been kind of banging it out for a while, they might need a break. They might need a vocal. They might need a breakdown. They may need something a bit more melodic. If you've been going really melodic for a while, they might want to get kind of entranced in something that's a bit more rhythmical and tribal and primal. So going back and forth, you can kind of feel what you would like if you were in the crowd. I remember years ago, I heard a quote from Carl Cox, and it was one of my favorites that I've ever heard. He basically said, I throw a party for myself in the DJ booth. If I feel like I want to dance to something, that's what I put on next. And hopefully everybody in the room is on board with me. And I've always kind of approached it that way too. If I feel like it's time for a vocal, the crowd probably feels like it's time for a vocal too. And if I feel like it's time to kind of keep things going and settle into a groove, that's probably what they're feeling too. And if I start to feel the energy drop or things like that, those would be signs for me that maybe it's time to mix it up with whatever I'm doing at the moment. Okay, next up, Sonic Industries asks, how did you get into techno? Is your background purely electronic? And then he says, I was a guitarist for many years. Electronica is a relatively recent pursuit. I've actually been in music my whole life. I started playing acoustic guitar because we had them laying around the house when I was a little kid. I played everything from bluegrass to rock to cover bands to, in high school, I was playing in blues rock covers bands, playing things like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Clapton and stuff like that. And then, kind of had that going at the same time that I was very much into electronic music. My personal music taste at the time started off with kind of new wave electronica, very into, Depeche Mode and New Order and The Cure and all of that stuff. Then that kind of developed into a bit harder music, which was more like, Ministry and Nine Inch Nails and Skinny Puppy and Front 242 and Nitzareb and all that stuff. And then that really kind of was the basis of my interest in electronic and synthesized and techno music in general. And that's really kept up over the years. And I also love house music. I love really a lot of different genres of music, but electronically, I've been a huge fan of digital and synthesized music for decades. Next, Fomas asks, is there something you're looking for which isn't really available these days? Also, what's your take on master bus processing in a hardware setup? As far as hardware equipment that there's not out there these days, it's funny because we live in a time where there is something for everyone. There's so much gear out there and all kinds of different capabilities and at every different price point, and no matter what your musical pursuits are. And I find that the things that I really fall in love with are things that I didn't even know I was looking for. All of a sudden something will come out and I'll be like, whoa, that's amazing. Why I would have never thought of that. And so, interestingly enough, the only piece of gear that I had been looking for that wasn't readily available was basically that need was served by the Syntact when it came out, because I was looking for something that was an analog drum synth and a synth-based workflow, not a sample-based workflow, but that was in the same form factor as the Digitact and Digatone. And so when that came out, I was like, man, these guys, it's like they were like they asked me what I wanted and they made it. Obviously there's some drawbacks to that machine, and there's things that they need to work on and things that I'm sure will get improved over time. But that was definitely something that I was looking for, and they filled that need. Let's see, the second part of that question was my take on bus processing. And another question I got was, I'd love to know your default settings on the analog heat for your stereo mix out. So that kind of answers the question. Yes, I think it's great to have some sort of processing on the end for live performance, especially if you're playing in an environment where you are maybe one of only one or a few live acts that are playing and everybody else is playing recorded music, so they're DJing, because all of those songs that they're going to be playing have all been professionally mixed and mastered. And so they've, everything's been EQ'd, everything's been compressed, everything has been, truly mastered and dialed in, and, compared against reference tracks and all sorts of things. So if you're making something that's live and improvisational, in order for it to sound like it belongs sonically in an evening of music that people are DJing stuff that's been mixed and mastered, you need some sort of processing on the end of it to kind of get everything kind of tied together, boost where you need it based on the equipment that you have, cut where you need it based on the equipment that you have, and kind of do a final kind of saturation and limiting so you can get it to a level where it's as mastered as it can be live, really. And there's a number of different ways to do that. My personal preference is the analog heat, but there are a number of machines out, the RNLA and the RNC are both great. If you've got millions of bucks burning a hole in your pocket, Stimming's mastering piece of gear seems to be completely amazing, but it's like $4,000. So, if you think the analog heat is expensive, that one's pretty pricey too, but it seems to be amazing. So it all kind of depends on what's value for you. But yes, having something on the end. As far as what I use the analog heat for, it took me a long time to get the analog heat. I kept hearing how great it was, and I was super skeptical. I said, there's no way anything is worth that kind of money that all it does is just process the signal at the end. At least for me, I know it does a lot more than that, but that was all I was going to use it for. And then I finally got one, and the first time I plugged it in to my existing live setup, I was within a couple of seconds, I was like, okay, I get it now. It was amazing how great just adding that level of saturation to a final signal. It was amazing how great it was for the overall sound. Now, what I do on mine is I saturate. I use, I think, the second setting, not the lowest one, but the second one up of, like, I think 10 or 12. So it gives a good level of saturation for the type of music that I do. Then I also give it just a little bit of drive, so that I can push that overdrive again to kind of thicken things up just a little bit. Then I put a high pass filter on the entire thing, but I bring that cutoff all the way down to about 20 hertz. So it's not really cutting off almost anything, because what I want to do then is add a little bit of resonance. So I get a resonant boost in the low end, and it really helps to beef up the low end between like 30 and 50 hertz by putting that cutoff down low and giving it a little bit of resonance there. It adds a real kind of thickness and fatness and boom to the low end that helps it line up better with things that have been mastered. And then to compensate for for that putting things out of balance, I do a little bit of a high boost as well. And that's pretty much it. And I made a preset in the analog heat that is just those things that I just explained. Save that, and it's all I ever do. I don't think I've touched it 20 times since I got it, once I did that setup, because for me that was what I really wanted it for, was that kind of final piece of basically analog mastering on the end of an improvised chain. So that's it. Let's see. Anthony Major says, I know your current live setup is solid, but why would you not use a Deluge? Is the Deluge missing something regarding its audio capacity? I use mine as a Brain or Sketchpad more. I'd love to get more depth out of it, like the Electron boxes give. So the Deluge is, for me, the reason why I have it and haven't sold it as I have with a bunch of other gear is because for me it is my favorite sketch pad. So it's something that when I travel, I will bring that with me so that I can use it on the plane or in an airport or in an Uber or whatever, and just like kill time and use it to sketch things out. The reason why I like it as opposed to some of the other machines that are out there is that once I sketch something out, I can do that using the audio tracks that are within the Deluge. And then when I get back into my studio, with the touch of one button, I can convert that audio track to a MIDI track, and I can then take that bass line that maybe wasn't my favorite sound, but it was enough that I could sketch something out, and I can turn it into a MIDI track and send that MIDI out to a subsequent 37, for example, and have that same bass line that I created while I was sketching, but I can flesh that out as a, with a full-blown synthesizer. That's something that has a lot more depth. Now, it's not a depth of sound thing that I don't use it in my live setup. The reason why I use the Electron boxes and not a Deluge in my live setup is because there are a lot more things on the face of the Electron boxes that is a lot more easily available, more readily available for performing live. So if I want to go in and adjust a filter and at the same time change a volume and at the same time mute a track, I can do all those things kind of at the same time on the face of that, or with one or two button presses. Where with the Deluge, every single function you have to go into another part of it to do that one thing, then come back out and go into another part and do another thing. The Deluge is great for sequencing and for writing melodies and for doing all of that stuff. But when it comes time to actually do sound design and effects and things like that, it's just a little bit too clunky and not quite immediate enough for me personally for a live setup. So that's the reason why I don't use it. It has nothing to do with the sonic abilities. It's just the interface lends itself more to sketching and to sequencing and writing than it does to improvising live. If you're writing things to then just be muted and unmuted live, it can be great for a live performance tool, but that's not the way I perform live, so it just doesn't fit into my workflow. All right, let's see here. Unknown Artist says, nowadays with really solid production in electronic music, for a new producer who can write solid tracks but lacks production value for whatever reason, do you think it's worth it to publish tracks? Tough question, because as a friend of mine, Jason Timothy, says all the time, you have to finish tracks. That's the key in music production to getting better at it. it's a skill like anything else. And if you just start things and get to a certain point and then drop them and then start something else and get to a point and drop it, you're practicing starting tracks, but you're not practicing finishing tracks. And you'll never get good at finishing tracks until you finish tracks. So you need to finish tracks. You need to produce, get a track all the way fleshed out, done, complete. But whether or not you should release that or put that out there, I guess that's totally up to you. And it really depends on why you're producing tracks. If you're producing tracks because you want to be a producer, because you want to get famous, because you want to, you want the world to hear your tracks, because you want people to buy them, things like that, maybe producing some of those lesser tracks at the beginning isn't the greatest idea, because then that will become your image. But you need to be finishing the tracks. So it kind of goes both ways. If the prospect of releasing something is what motivates you to finish something, then yeah, I guess release them. But at the same time, be realistic. I can't remember who it was that said this, but they said that when you're producing music, your first 100 tracks will suck. So the faster you can finish 100 completed tracks, the sooner you're going to get to the tracks that don't suck. And the idea behind that is that you're going to be writing and learning and trying things and experimenting and trial and error, and you're going to be getting better at everything throughout all the process of doing 100 tracks. But my advice would be, if you really want to do something professionally, is don't release those 100 tracks, but do them all, finish them all, and maybe put them out on SoundCloud, maybe give them out to your friends, maybe try playing them out live if you're a DJ or a performer. But as far as releasing or sending off to record labels or things like that, I would say wait until you've knocked out all the sucky tracks first and you get to the really good ones, and then be a little bit more selective about which ones are the ones that you want to represent you, because every track you put out is kind of like your business card. So when you put something out, it's telling people, this is what I do, this is what I sound like, these are the things that kind of define me as an artist. So be careful about those things that you put out, because you're going to want that to really define you as an artist, if that's what you're doing. All right, so let's see here. Do you apply any type of mastering before sending it out to the PA? Yes, we already went over that. Not a Name says, what are your thoughts on the Dirty Wave M8? Is it on your list to purchase? It's actually beyond that. It's actually been paid for and ordered, but I haven't gotten it yet. So I'm still on the list like everybody else is. But yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on it. I'm excited at the idea, very much like the Deluge, I'm excited at the idea of something that is portable and can be used as a sketch pad that can then be easily integrated back into my production studio setup at home. There's been a whole bunch of hoopla out there about the OP1 and the OP1 field, and that for me was the biggest thing. I have nothing against Teenage Engineering or the OP1, but when I bought an OP1 and tried to use it, it was fun for the sketchpad part, but then trying to integrate that back into a studio setting to flesh those tracks out into something else was so clunky and difficult that's why it just didn't line up with my workflow. And that's why for me, the Deluge has been that piece. When I don't need something battery powered, the Digitact is that piece, for very much the same reasons. And so the Dirty Wave M8 or Mate, however you want to call it, for me, that's the plan for that. Is I want to try it out as something that I can portably take with me, on a train, on a bus, on an airplane, whatever, sketch out some ideas and then bring them back into the studio, connect it very easily to MIDI out, which is the big thing for me that was lacking with the OP1, and being able to use the studio equipment that I have and use my hybrid setup, my DAW setup with my studio equipment to be able to flesh those ideas out into full-blown tracks. So yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to get it. All right. Polyphonic asks, how do you find other artists or shows that are doing live electronic music on machines? Most of what I've been able to find in my area are DJ sets. Yeah, there are way less live performers than there are DJs out there for sure. You know, the expression everybody's a DJ, but not everybody's a live performer. It takes a lot more time and effort and all of that stuff to learn everything. So there's not an easy way to find it. I mean, I guess push your local promoters to book live acts. You know, there are some great live acts out there that are touring. So if they're looking for headliners, you can do that. And, you know, start to ask around, get involved in your local synth community and see who's doing what. If you've got a local synthesizer shop in your area, get involved with them, because obviously they're going to be the ones that knows who's doing that kind of stuff, because they're probably selling them gear. So, yeah, get involved with that. It's probably the best way, and start to help grow it yourself in the area. All right. Aryan Shuyit. I'm butchering your name, I'm totally sure. But he says, please tell me something about setting up your levels from different machines to have one solid end mix. Gain staging in live performance is super, super important. And basically what that means is setting your levels from the very beginning, from the first thing, especially if you've got things running through other things, setting your levels correctly from the beginning. And then something for me that I've kind of used as far as, you know, within the live arena is trying to set things so that the levels are set at a limit, meaning that, you know, for example, I'll set certain machines where it's always at 12 o'clock. That's my base level, my master volume from that machine. So if I look at it, I can see really quickly if I'm where I set things up at the beginning. There are other machines where I will set, you know, the individual track levels at, you know, the maximum is the level that balances out with everything else. So like with the Electron machines, you have your channel volume, you've got your master level, you've got your channel level, then you've got your amp volume, and one other one I can't remember. So setting those so that one of them is all the way at the max, and using that one to adjust your mix volume while you're playing makes it so that you're sure that you're never going to overload things, because you take that all the way up to the maximum. So I'll bring the other volume levels down so that my track level volume can be maxed out and it's exactly where it needs to be. But that's just me. But it is important to have ways that you can be sure that you know where you are from a level perspective when you're performing. All right, let's see. Roman Phoenix says, when you do a set with both machines, do you create the same name for the project in both to save, or can you save on one machine since they're connected? This might be a stupid question. Actually, I'm personally, first of all, having nothing anything to do with the specific question, for me, there is no such thing as a stupid question. All these read the effing manual people out there have forgotten somewhere along the way that we were all beginners at one point. And if somebody's asking you a question, take that as a compliment. That means that they trust your input and your opinion. They value your opinion. So if you can help them out, help them out. And if you can't, step aside and let somebody else help them out. But this whole like putting people down because they're asking dumb questions, I am totally against that. So total side note, but just to put that out there. So as far as performing with multiple machines, I don't build out full tracks and then do program changes, you know, where we're going from one to the next on different machines. If you do, it's a good idea to keep those things organized. So maybe not the same name, but maybe, you know, whatever is pattern 1 on your Digitact is pattern 1 on your Octatrack is pattern 1 on your Syntact, so that when you then move to pattern 2, you can move to pattern 2 with all of them and you can set up program changes. For me, I don't do it that way, so I don't need to, but I would suggest that if that's the way you're going to build tracks, that you definitely do something like that. Otherwise, you're going to get totally lost when you're performing. And when the adrenaline's there and you're in front of people and there's lights flashing in your eyes and it's dark and you can't see, that's not the moment when you want to be fumbling around trying to figure out what each machine is doing. So if you are doing it that way, definitely set them up so that they're organized. Let's see. DJ Katron says, did you ever get into using MPCs? I tried. I had an MPC Live that I got not too long ago, and I also tried the Akai Force. They what they do really, really well. Unfortunately for me, it didn't align with the way I produce and perform. But there are people that I would recommend those to far before a lot of the gear that I use to produce and perform. If, for example, you are somebody who likes to perform your drums in, the pads on the MPC are the best that there are. I mean, the Machina is right in there too, but I think the MPC pads are the best. They've been doing it the longest, and they're kind of the experts at it. So if you perform in finger drumming or even want to perform in chords using pads, their pads are definitely the best. They're way better than using the clicky buttons on a sequencer. There's some debate back and forth about the touchscreen versus not touchscreen. I don't personally like it, and that's because for me, I like the tactile feel and the muscle memory that gets created by knowing, for example, on an Electron device, if I press, trig, that whole menu becomes the trig menu, and those 8 knobs are the things that I need to get to. So I know exactly where that is, and I can do it really without looking at it in the dark. Whereas with an MPC, there's no point of reference for muscle memory because the screen's flat. There's no feedback from that. So for me, it was much more difficult to use for that. And then the other part about the MPCs that didn't really go along with the way I perform, because I don't pre-plan out every move that I'm gonna make. I need everything readily available, and it can't be more than one level of menu deep. Otherwise, it's too difficult for me to get to in the setting and quickly enough that I need to do that. So I didn't like, for example, if I wanted to go in and adjust a synth, having to go into multiple levels to get down to that thing, or with effects, going to an effects page and then going to that effect and then going to the function that I wanted, and having it be, one page was the certain buttons on the side of the screen, and then going to another page to get the next level of buttons. And sometimes the buttons were vertical and the menus were vertical, but other times those vertical buttons corresponded to a horizontal menu. So there was a lot of stuff as far as like immediacy for performance that I didn't connect with, and that's the reason why I sold the MPC that I got. I did give it a try because there are definitely a lot of great things that they do, and there's a lot of people out there that love them, and I see why. And for certain styles of music, I think that they're the best that there is. So if you are a finger drum performance type, if you're doing lo-fi, if you're doing hip hop, if you're doing more ambient stuff, all of those things it lends itself very well to. If your stuff is sequencer based, there's just not any comparison to the Electron boxes, and so that's why I gravitated that way when I was exploring and figuring out what pieces of equipment I wanted to perform live with. The techno that I do and house that I do is very sequencer based, and so there just was no comparison to what I found with the Electron boxes. But if I wasn't doing that, I would totally go with an MPC or a Machina or one of the other machines for sure. Let's see. Regis K says, I'm a complete noob with synths, etc. Where to start? Where to start? I would start with free DAW and free VST synthesizers to just try to learn it, try and mess around with it. If you want something with knobs and stuff, you can get a MIDI controller for really super cheap, and it keeps you from having to dive into the expensive world of hardware synthesizers. But if you are looking for that, I would say find something that has a traditional layout, and that's simple, like maybe a single oscillator or 2 oscillators, so that you can really learn the signal path. If you want something that you're not going to outgrow, I would say something like a Minilog or the Minilog XD. Those are great for learning because things are laid out pretty well. Something like the MS-20 is another one, or the Micro Freak, or see, Microbrute, Mini Brute, some of those, because they all have a fairly simple signal path, but they all put out some really cool sounds. And so it'll be something that will teach you what different waveforms sound like, how those waveforms are impacted by filters, how they are modulated by LFOs, how to create an envelope and what to use it for, and how it gives you those sounds that you want. So finding something that can simply do all of those is where I would start. And there's a lot of stuff that's readily available out there for a couple $100. So it keeps you from diving too far deep into things before you realize if it's something that you're going to really enjoy doing. All right, next question. Curl says, is this your job? How do you earn your living? This is not my job. Music has been my hobby for my entire life since I was in elementary school. It's always been something that I did on the side and for fun. I've been DJing for multiple decades. I've been producing music for multiple decades, and I do those things professionally in the sense that I make money DJing, I make money performing live, I make money selling productions and making music and doing mixing and mastering and teaching lessons and things like that. So I guess from that sense, it is kind of a professional thing, but it is not my source of income. I realized a long time ago that I would never be able to make a living at music, and but it's something that I'm super passionate about, and not only about doing myself, but teaching other people. And so that's why I do this channel, is because I really love to help kind of grow this passion that I have in other people who are discovering a passion for producing and performing music, because it's given me so much over the course of my life that I want to be able to give it back. But no, in my regular everyday life, I am a consultant, and I work with food and beverage operations with restaurants and bars and nightclubs, and I travel all over the country and the world, and I teach people how to open restaurants and bars and nightclubs, and how to fix them when they're not working properly, and all of that stuff. So I travel a lot from work, and so gives me a chance, a lot of free time to make music and play music while I travel and in my off time. So no, it is not how I earn my living, but it is something that I have done as a pro hobby for many, many, many years. So let's see here. How has techno ruined your life? That's a great name, by the way. They ask, have you ever played a party during Memorial Day weekend in Detroit? So for Movement Music Festival, no, I haven't. I actually have never played in Detroit. I would love to at some point someday, but I haven't. I've gotten to play some pretty amazing places around the world. Played for years in Ibiza at Space and Amnesia, and some huge clubs out there, which was amazing, and boat parties and all kinds of stuff. I played in Mexico City, and I've played, all over the US. So got a chance to play some pretty amazing places, but I have never played in Detroit. So if anybody's interested in bringing me out to Detroit to play, I would be more than happy to do that. So just let me know. All right, a couple more here, and then we'll wrap this up. So, hi Circo, new subscriber. Cool, thanks for subscribing, I appreciate that. I was curious if you ever compose music outside the type that we see on your channel. You seem to have the chops, but seem to stick to dance stuff. Nothing wrong with that. Thanks, I really enjoy the videos. Well, I'm glad you enjoy the videos, I appreciate that. I enjoy making them a lot. I have written a ton of different music of all different styles and genres, and everything from singer-songwriter type guitar stuff to super ambient chill out synthesized music to I've produced and released a lot of techno and house music over the years under a bunch of different monikers, as Circo, as Eric Bingham, as Ricard. I've had the pleasure of releasing on a bunch of big labels, whether it's techno or house, but that has always been really my passion as far as music production. I love to make electronic music. I love to make dance music. I love to make house and techno music, particularly techno in general. It's where my passion lies. I love the process of it. I'm a geek for electronics and gadgets. And so combining that with my nerdiness for music has made kind of producing techno a natural development out of those different things, because it's a great way to combine the two. I'm just about to dip my toe into the crazy bottomless pit of modular, which I have intentionally stayed away from for a long time, because I know myself and I know that as soon as I get started in that, I will go down the rabbit hole and you'll never find me. So I'm excited to get started. Look for some videos coming up about that soon. But yeah, it's this is what I love to do, although I have done a lot of other stuff. And recently, something that I've started to get into and watch some tutorials about and take some online courses about is scoring for movies and television. Super interesting to me. So it's something that I would love to get into. Another passion of mine is movies. So, the chance to kind of put all of these different things together is really interesting to me. And I think that idea got kicked off, I want to say about a year or so ago, when I watched a really cool documentary about Ludwig Göransson, who did the score for the Mandalorian series. And I loved to see his process about how he did that in his studio using, real instruments, and how he recorded it and then combined it with synthesizers and tried to do really experimental stuff, which I thought was really cool. And it sparked something in me. And then I looked into his score for Tenet, which I think was absolutely amazing as well. And just the whole idea of bringing that idea of improvisation and creativity and sonic exploration into scoring for movies and television. And I had never really thought about it before, because for me, the ones that scored movies and television were like, like John Williams doing Star Wars, and you was a conductor up there in front of a giant orchestra, and you had to be able to, score every piece of an orchestra. And I was like, well, that's not me. And then I started looking into some other people that are out there doing this, and the stuff that they're doing is pretty amazing. If you want to check out Junkie XL on his channel on YouTube, is amazing. He did things like Deadpool and stuff like that. And he came from the world of producing house and techno and trance music, and was big since the 90s in the rave scene, and now has gotten into that side of things. And it's cool to watch his process and see how he does stuff as well. So yeah, I love the fact that there's lots of different kinds of music out there, and I'm interested in all of it and in making all of it, not necessarily releasing all of it, because as I mentioned earlier on, you got to make a lot of crappy stuff before you make something good. So I will have fun making the crappy stuff for myself, because for me, I love the process of making music even more than the end result. The process of, the creative process itself is what I'm really passionate about. And so that's why for me, it doesn't matter what the end result is. If a track does well, I've had tracks in top 5 on Beatport, but that wasn't what I was doing it for. I was doing it because I love to make the music. I love the process of making music. So as long as I can keep doing that and hopefully share that with other people, I will keep doing that. So on that note, I think that's a good place to end things here. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more things like this, let me know in the comments down below and ask some more questions. I'll do my best to respond to them in the comments. But if not, I'll definitely do another one of these if it's something that you guys are interested in. I enjoy this. I like the kind of more casual, talky type stuff sometimes, and not always like the technical deep dive into things. So if you'd like more, and if you've got some more questions, please put those down below. Otherwise, if you'd like to get some of the other content that I do here, please subscribe to the channel and click the little bell, and that way you'll get notified when new videos come out. And if you'd like this one, give it a like and a thumbs up and a comment. That way the all-powerful YouTube algorithm might push it out to a few more people, so some more people will discover the channel, and it will keep growing as crazy as it has been lately. Lots of cool things coming up, some collaborations with some other people, and some really fun videos about some different things coming up very soon. So I'm really, really excited for what's coming up next, and I really appreciate everybody who's been subscribing and been watching the videos. Thank you guys so much. Couldn't do this without you, and I really enjoy doing this. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next video. In the meantime, take care of each other.